What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here with JaboctheGreat. Welcome back to The Last Word. Today, we're going to talk about this crazy, wild, whatever you want to call it, game from Saturday night between Alabama and Georgia. Unfortunately for us, our picks were wrong. We both picked Georgia in this one, and we figured wouldn't be a shootout. And I guess it was a shootout back and forth. Alabama started out early, putting up points like nothing, and then late third quarter into the fourth quarter, Georgia was all over Alabama and that defense. But in the end, Alabama, they catapulted number one in the AP poll with a 41-34 victory over Georgia once again.
Yeah, we were wrong on this one. Alabama comes through again. Georgia cannot beat this team. And I guess, you think of a shootout as pistol shooting, right? Like 7-7, 14-14, kind of like that with the football score. This is like two shotgun blasts. It was like, boom, 21-0, and then Georgia was like, hold on, wait. We actually want to play. Tried a little bit in the fourth quarter. Took the lead. Looks like they might have had a miracle victory on a massive touchdown. And then Alabama did the exact same thing and then took the lead back, and that would be the end of the game. Georgia ends up in the fifth spot. Alabama ends up in number one. A lot of fallout from this one around that top area. Let's look at it on paper. Jalen Milroe dominated in every way possible. He went 27 for 33, had 374 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and a pick. Not so bad, and then led the team in rushing with a massive 117 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So 4 total touchdowns, almost 500 yards altogether. Just a crazy game for Jalen Milroe. Only one turnover on that end as well. You can't really be mad at him at all. Justice Haynes was second on the ground with 35 yards, but it would be Jeremy Bernard with 18 yards who got a touchdown, and then Ryan Williams, the young 17-year-old receiver at Alabama, got 177 yards and a touchdown on just 6 receptions. Touchdown being the 75-yard game winner that would when they traded Hail Marys with Georgia. Jam Miller brought in the other air touchdown on his one catch, a 16-yard TD, and then CJ Dipre, I'm not entirely sure, was second in receiving yards with 38 yards for them. And then here we go. Let's get to the defensive action on Carson Beck. Jamarian Latham recovered a Carson Beck fumble, and then Jahad Campbell, Damani Jackson, and Xavier Brown all picked off Carson Beck. Not a great day for Beck. I'll transition right to that. Carson Beck went 27 for 50. Not so great. 433 yards. That is pretty good. 3 touchdowns, but also 3 picks. I don't know. There's not really a way for me to sum up the performance. You can feel it from watching it too, just because of the way Georgia started and the way Georgia ended. It just feels mid, right? Like if he didn't do what he did in the beginning, then they would have a much better outcome from here. So everything kind of amalgamates. I mean, he ends up playing pretty good, but it's hard to outweigh 4 turnovers total. Trevor Etienne led the Bulldogs on the ground with 55 yards and got himself a touchdown. Dylan Bell had a rushing touchdown himself with just 9 yards. He was second on the ground. Arian Smith led the game in the air with 6 receptions and 132 yards. Got himself a touchdown, and then again, Dylan Bell is second in receiving, just as he was second in rushing. This time he gets 5 receptions, 100 yards, and a touchdown. Big day for Dylan Bell altogether, 2 touchdowns for him. And then Lawson Lucky would be the other player to end up getting a touchdown from Carson Beck. As I said, big story for this one, really, aside from Alabama just dominating, is Carson Beck lost a fumble and threw 3 interceptions. As good as he played, 440 yards, 3 touchdowns, 27 completions. Those 4 turnovers are pretty big when you end up losing this game by not that much. I mean, for a while it looked like, well, you're done. You got dominated. But they come back, they fight back. Georgia plays exceptionally well. In that second half, fourth quarter, they lit on fire. Just could not stop Ryan Williams on that last throw. And he got all the way downfield. And maybe Bama gets downfield anyway. Gets to the field goal target line and puts the game away, which is a smaller score. But certainly the defense got caught lacking on that last play, and just 2 defenders let Ryan Williams get right downfield, and that was over. So, yeah, I don't know. This one was crazy. We said what we thought it would be. Kind of a slower defensive battle that Georgia would come out on top of. Instead, Georgia went down 21-0 in the first quarter, and then in the fourth quarter, throughout the second half, and starting, I guess, really in the second quarter, they started to score points. The fourth quarter, Georgia really decided, like, hey, we would actually like to win this game. And unfortunately, when they traded Hail Marys, the Crimson Tide come out on top of the Bulldogs again. But no Saban, no problem.
Yeah, I was expecting, we were probably expecting a game that was more reminiscent of the SEC title game. from last year. And obviously Georgia lost that one. And I kind of said like, hey, they got to come out much better, offensively. And just some plays that Jalen Milroe made later in that game end up, giving Bama the win there. This one, I couldn't imagine a worse start for Georgia in this game. I could not believe it. And you mentioned it, like it was basically a shotgun blast. Georgia, that first drive on defense, I mean, you let them get all the way down the field, basically zero resistance there. Um, you had a couple penalties on Georgia, um, and then a couple penalties on Alabama there as well. So, I mean, even with the penalties on both teams on that drive, Alabama got all the way down the field, scored a touchdown, made it look pretty easy. Then they did the exact same thing the next drive. And it was like, this is ridiculous. I mean, what is the what is the Georgia defense doing out there? They couldn't stop Jalen Milroe, and it's funny to say like when you ran through his stats, he does have almost 400 yards passing, but almost only 2 touchdowns passing. It didn't feel like it when you were watching, but
Yeah.
you remember like he had 100 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns as well. So I mean, he had an absolutely exceptional game. I mean, he was making a Heisman case pretty early in that one. And then, like you mentioned, those picks by Carson Beck obviously didn't help there. That third touchdown by Bama to put him up 21-0 was off of a Carson Beck interception.
Yeah.
So, clearly not putting his team in a good spot there. I mean, you just go down 14-0, make a bad pass, throw an interception, and early on, I mean, really up until the third, mid-third quarter, when they started to put it on Alabama's defense, like Carson Beck just looked out of sorts. I mean, he just wasn't throwing good passes. Just connections with his receivers weren't there. Even had a intentional grounding that turned into a safety, in the end zone. I mean, it was just like everything was going wrong for him at that point. So at that point he had 2 interceptions, plus the safety. I mean, it was about as bad as you can really get. But then, they started to pick things up in the third quarter, late third quarter. And even when it was like 33-15, like in my opinion, I still wasn't expecting Georgia to come back. I felt like, all right, obviously at this point, Alabama really hadn't done much of anything since early second. I was like, all right, it's kind of calmed down. That early flurry, they've started to quell that a little bit, but I'm not expecting Georgia to just all of a sudden turn it on. Like, yeah, that first, their first 2 touchdown drives were good, but it wasn't like I was expecting them to just come out and do what they did in the fourth quarter. It was just bang, bang, bang. I mean, it was ridiculous. I had never seen nothing like this before. Like their last couple touchdowns there. One of them was set up by almost 50-yard pass by Arian Smith, I should say. And then the 67-yard touchdown to Dylan Bell. I mean, it was like 15-33. You blinked, Georgia was in the lead. And now you flip the table, turning around, Alabama is in the position is like, what's going on with their defense? I mean, they just completely fell apart there at the end. But like you mentioned, Ryan Williams, he came out. This dude's 17 years old, and he's not like, 17. He's supposed to turn 18 like in a couple of weeks. Like he doesn't turn 18 until next spring, I think. He reclassified. He's supposed to be 2025, reclassified 2024. I mean, this kid is going to be special. And just from the first couple of games, you can tell like he's going to be great. And obviously he's got to play 3 years before he can get to the NFL. So I mean, he's going to get even better. And that was just a special play. I mean, you see guys that are in college football for 3-4 years that don't make the type of play that he did at the end there, making the defenders for Georgia look stupid. So I mean, this is probably one of the best fourth quarters I think I've ever seen. Offensively, obviously for Georgia, but then with Alabama getting that long 75-yard touchdown to Ryan Williams to finish it off, basically. And what's even more frustrating for Georgia, that last interception for Carson Beck, like I don't understand why he threw it up. Like, dog, it's first down. You're at the 20. You like it's what 45 seconds left. Like you don't need to throw it up like that. Like why?
No.
I don't. It was just more like stupid decisions, and he's a good quarterback, so it's not like I'm not getting on him like for like saying he's trash, but that was just a bonehead decision. I mean, maybe they don't end up scoring there. I don't know, but at that point, I mean, Alabama's defense had shown zero resistance against Georgia. I mean, they scored 4 straight drives there, so or 3 straight drives at least. So it was just a bad decision there. You didn't even give your team a chance to go down. I mean, if you throw a pick, like it's 4th down or something, you throw a pick, and you're at like the 20. Like, sure, we see that happen all the time, but to throw a pick like that, throwing it up at the end, not even really giving your team a chance after you did so much work to come back, after you played so well to come back, it just kind of sucks. But at the end of the day, that's Georgia's fault for not having a much better performance in the first half. I mean, you can't come out against a team like Alabama and play virtually no defense, let them run up and down the field, and even with a comeback late, expect to win.
Yeah, I think you could say that the last pick from Carson Beck is kind of like an amalgamation of the game, right? Yeah, like if you don't have those earlier 2 picks and play the way you played early in the game, that you could have been in a shootout this whole time,
Right.
and maybe you get a win. Instead, you decided to wait to the fourth quarter to then play one of the greatest fourth quarters we've ever seen. Um, not Carson Beck specifically, but both of these teams kind of light up. Georgia goes crazy in the fourth quarter, but it all kind of comes crashing down when you allow a one play 75-yard touchdown after your one play 67-yard touchdown. And then you get a good 11-play drive. You're moving down the field. It's first down, and you make a dumb decision. It's a pick, and that's it. It's over. And it just kind of feels like maybe Georgia had it coming on that one, right? You took too long to get it going. You already had 2 picks. So you tried to wash that away. You tried to lock in, play a little bit better. But Alabama had kind of been waiting. I think really and truthfully, I mean, we might be having a different conversation had Alabama lost to that 67-yard touchdown, or if Georgia scored again on that last play, we might be having a different convo about, oh well, Alabama really squandered this one. But I think truthfully, the way Alabama played, they definitely should have had this one. And I think that the football guys just kind of stepped in for Georgia and were like, hey, maybe you should have tried this earlier. We're gonna whisper in Beck's ear and tell him to throw this ball up on first and 10 at the 20. So that decision for Beck there leads to a loss to Alabama here. Doesn't mean Beck's a bad quarterback, but I mean, I don't know how much Beck's name has been thrown around in the Heisman race, but Jalen Milroe has definitely been up there, and 374 yards in the air with 2 touchdowns, which again, I think you put it perfectly. It does not feel correct, especially when you consider one of those is at the end of the game. It feels like he had more than that going on in the air, but he did have 117 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, with a 36-yard scramble being the height of his rushing. It just feels like Milroe came in this game with something to prove. Alabama was ranked below Georgia. Georgia looked a little rocky in the beginning against Clemson. They looked a little rocky against Kentucky. Alabama has had their pretty smooth season and was ready to make themselves be known, and it got them all the way to first. I think that I would maybe prefer to have Texas still be first, but I really can't argue against Alabama being put up there. I think they earned it. I mean, regardless of what they allowed to happen in the fourth quarter, they just came out in the first quarter and certainly earned a first spot for the next week.
Yeah, and just to finish out, I mean, look, Georgia, I give them credit at least in this sense that they did come back. Because if Georgia had lost this game, say 33, 35-10 or whatever, we'd be having a whole different discussion about, what's up with Georgia and do they even deserve to really be in the top 5? I'd assume they wouldn't be had they lost, if they had never really come back in this game and had they lost by 20 or more points. So, and I would agree, Texas, like, obviously, they had been clearly the best team to start. But when you're Alabama, and even if it's at home, you're Alabama, you beat the number 2 team, like you're obviously going to jump up to 1, and it's going to be settled in a couple weeks anyway because Georgia ends up playing Texas in Texas, so we'll see how that one goes too.